This, ladies and gentlemen, is a 1967 Fastback GT 390 big block S-code numbers matching Mustang. I know this is a departure from the type of cars that have shown up on my channel, but I've got a soft spot for the late 60s classic muscle cars. My first car when I was 16 was a 1968 Mustang. That car was $900 and it had 140,000 miles on it when I got it, so it was wiped out, and I had to learn how to wrench on that car in order to keep it running. And so it's always been, I've owned a lot of nicer cars than that since then, but it's always been an important part of any young person's experience when they have their first car, first date, first prom. I took that car to college, so it meant a lot to me. So after all these years, I've never owned another Mustang in all those years since the 80s, and so I've returned to that experience with this car. I spent months looking for a car like this, and what you can find in the marketplace is either a gutted out roller that's got nothing except a body, or you find a fully restored car that is approaching six figures. It's what I wanted though, because I like the restoration process. I wanted a car that had yet to be restored and needed to be restored, but it wasn't a rust bucket and pieces from different cars. I wanted it to be as original as possible, and that's quite the unicorn. But I found this car, and from the distance of where that camera is, it might look pretty good, but it needs a restoration. Okay, let me stop here. Sometimes you'll hear me use the term restoration. I know a full restoration would involve completely disassembling the car, media blasting everything, with the car on a rotisserie, and addressing every found sign of aging. So this is not a restoration by that definition. However, such an invasive project is not what this car needs. One of the absolute best things about this car is the lack of degradation. It's an original survivor. Every square inch of this car is original metal as assembled by the factory. So my objective here is more about preserving and protecting the car from ever getting to the point where it needs a full restoration. I subscribe to the thought that the car can only be original once. So I'll be going through every square inch and very gently determining what can I save, what can be cleaned up or refinished in a way that it can be put back on the car and be the same car that drove the streets of LA in the late 60s. There's plenty of work to do on this car. This was originally bought by a doctor in California, and that's part of the reason why it's in such great shape, is it spent a lot of its early years in that dry climate. And he owned this car for over 10 years. I bought it from the person that's owned it since 1979. The person I bought this car from has had it all those years, and he took really good care of it. He actually lived in Connecticut, but he kept it in a garage and he never drove it in bad weather. So I'm one of the few owners of this car, and it's really in remarkable, unrestored condition. Throughout this series of videos, I will be showing a lot of the details about this car, but one thing that anytime someone does a restoration they have to decide on is color. So this car is Raven Black, and what's interesting is when this car was brand new, it was actually Wimbledon white. And so the first thought you may have is, well, restore it back to white. But I like the story of why it's Raven Black. That first owner, that doctor that bought it and loved this car and lived in this house, he wanted a black Fastback. They couldn't get him one. The dealer said, we can't find a black Fastback GT 390. And so he reluctantly bought the white car. He basically drove it down the street within a few months of owning it, and he had it changed he went to a paint shop, a body shop, and he had it changed to a black car. And this is that same paint from 1967. So I think that's a cool story. So I'm going to double down on that story. I'm going to keep it black. I'm actually going to keep this paint. I'm going to save the paint. I'm going to call it Operation Save the Paint. There's a lot of patina here, a lot of chips and little dings, but there's no rust. And this paint looks beautiful in my opinion, even though it doesn't look like a new car painted by a robot. But I'm going to save this paint as part of that story. And I'm not just going to repaint it black. I'm going to do paint correction on this car and then call it good. And that'll be part of the project. But the car needs plenty of other work. A lot of the interior is original carpet, original floors. Again, no rust. So it's going to be quite a fun project for me, and I'll document all of it in a series of videos on YouTube. So as you get up closer to this car, you can start to see the age and the examples of how this car has been used and had little dings but all of that, I'm going to address all of that, and I'll document everything. Look at the checking on this lacquer paint. I don't know if that shows up on camera, but I've got a plan for that as well. So it's going to be a great process, fun, nostalgic experience for me. So before we start taking the car apart, I wanted to show some video of me collecting the car when I purchased it. I actually flew up to see the car a week earlier and gave a down payment, and then flew back home, and then went back up the following week with my trailer and picked up the car. My friend Ken went with me. You see him here opening that side door, and he just helped me as a buddy to go get the car. And then I drove it, well, we trailered it all the way back to Virginia. I forgot how many hours it was. It was like a 5-hour drive or something. And then here we are back at my home, and I'm unloading the car that evening, and kind of a chilly night. You can see the steam there. So just loaded the car out and took it out of the trailer, loaded it into the garage, and started to assess what I had bought. Let's do a quick walk around of the car. It has what's called deluxe interior, which includes upgraded seats, a center console, and also an upper console on the roof, which I think is one of the coolest things. It also has a really nice flat folding rear seat. But the interior does have, once you get up close, it is showing age, like this door handle. All the weather stripping around the car, all the rubber, a lot of it needs to be replaced. That'll be part of the project. The wheels need to be refinished. And where do I even start with the paint? I'll devote an entire episode to Operation Save the Paint. Let's open up the hood and see what we have. So the first thing I notice is the hood is straight, and it's almost rust-free, but it does have some age. And I'll end up taking this hood off and detailing it and cleaning it up. But here's our 390 big block. From what I can tell, everything's original here. This is the original engine. I don't know if this is the original radiator or not, but it's certainly a proper factory style radiator. The car does have air conditioning. I don't think it works. I'm going to fix that. Power brakes back there. You can see the vacuum booster. There is power steering on this car. And this also has, and this was customary for this year, is the smog pump, the thermactor that pumps air into the exhaust manifold to help burn off excess fuel that didn't get burned during the initial combustion. It's got the 390 air cleaner, the chrome valve covers, which are also correct for this year. This is dirty. I'm gonna clean everything up. And you see some new paint here on the intake manifold and the cylinder heads. The previous owner tells me that he had some problems with overheating, and he determined it was a bad head gasket. So these heads have been taken off not too long ago, and the head gasket replaced. So while that was off, they painted the intake manifold and the heads and the block. And what I don't know is, was a valve job done? Was head work done then? But I'll end up pulling these spark plugs and looking in there with a bore scope, and I'll determine all that. But I've done nothing with this engine so far other than check the oil, verify the oil, and check the coolant. I did pull off the air cleaner once just to see the 4-barrel, but everything's here. And it starts and runs. It doesn't idle well at all. I'm not sure the choke circuit is working, so that's something I'll need to look at, but I'll get that figured out. But I'm just going to go through all of this and investigate, learn, and repair as needed. It doesn't burn oil, it doesn't smoke, and I'll end up checking the compression at the cylinders, and I'll check the timing. I'll probably rebuild the carburetor and change the plugs and change the oil. I'll do the standard things, but beyond that I don't know. I will go in and clean out this entire engine bay and repaint and redetail it. I'll put in an export brace to strengthen up the front end, and just a lot of cosmetic work. And just my pet peeve is I want everything to work. If it's on the car, if it came on the car new, I want it to work. So all of these things will work. The AC will work, the brakes will be in great shape. I did notice, as far as the transmission, it's an automatic transmission, so that makes this a GTA. And I've got a significant leak. It probably drips 5 or 10 drips a day out of the automatic transmission. So I've got a drip pan underneath the car to capture that red ATF, but that doesn't scare me. The transmission shifts well, and I think it might have a shift kit in it. It shifts very firm between gears in a good way, but I will find that leak and I'll fix it, even if it requires me to pull the transmission. So none of that worries me. Actually, mechanical work like this is my comfort food. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this car with cosmetic things and condition, but where I'm most comfortable is right here. So I'll save this till last to work on the powertrain of the car. So let's go through the punch list as I see it. The very first thing I need to do, the steering column has an issue with the upper bearing right behind the steering wheel. That whole steering wheel moves like this. So first thing I'm going to do is pull the steering column, and there's a place in the Midwest that does a great job of rebuilding that whole final part of the upper steering column. I'm going to send that column off and have that done. Then I'm going to go through the interior. So that means pulling everything out, seats, carpet, everything, inspect the floors, repaint, repair, whatever the floors may need, the metal floors, and put everything back, new carpet. Right now, you can't tell on video, of course, but it smells. If you lift the carpet and start to move it around, it doesn't smell great, so that's a sign of mold. So I'll deal with all of that. I've also got new old stock. I've got a new instrument pod for this deluxe interior that the previous owner bought over 40 years ago. A brand new in the box Ford Motor Company instrument pods. I'm going to go ahead and put that on just because it feels good, and the old instrument pod looks really tired. At that point, I'm going to start working on exterior cosmetics. Like I want to as I've said, the car was originally Wimbledon white, and they never did change the color in the trunk. So the trunk is still white, and it looks tired and weak, just like a lot of old trunks from 1967. So I'm going to go through the trunk and clean it all up, address any issues, and complete the color change to black inside the trunk. At that point, I'll refinish the wheels. These are the original styled steel wheels. I think it's the original paint on the wheels. I'll clean those up and repaint the inner sections. And then I'm going to start the lengthy process of paint correction. You know, I mentioned earlier that I'm not going to have the car repainted. It can always be repainted in the future. I'm going to save this paint, Operation Save the Paint. So I'm going to start on this car on the front passenger side fender, and I'm going to go around clockwise and just work on every panel. It'll probably take weeks or maybe months, I don't know, to fix blemishes and to do paint correction, wet sanding, buffing, and I'm going to see what I can do with this paint. I'm optimistic about it. And while I'm doing that, I'll replace any trim that's necessary. This is a deluxe interior, trimmed out car that has a lot of pretty bright work. So I've got new old stock bumpers that I'll put on the car and improve everything on the exterior. And then at the end, I move into the powertrain. I mentioned a few minutes ago that that's where I'm most comfortable. So I'll go through the engine, transmission, brakes, suspension, and do whatever's necessary to bring this car up to excellent condition. So that's the punch list at this time. So here's a teaser for episode 2. I'll be sorting out the problems with the steering column, rebuilding the instrument cluster, and tackling the floors and the carpet. Join me then.